May 1910. The Anglo-Boer War was from 1880 to 1881, and the second one was 1899 to 1902. From 1912, there were already forced removals. And in responding to that question, Africans came together.
For me, the debate around land has evolved immensely in the past 22 years. I do not think that, in some of the circles I go in, I still hear a very archaic and static debate when I think the discourse has actually shifted. I think that primarily for me there are three issues involved. It's firstly the question of the date, right, which the Institute is raising quite correctly. The second issue is the question of whether when you expropriate land, must you do so based on market value or not? And I think the recent parliamentary process has sought to resolve that. The last one, which I think is the last primary issue, is whether, like minerals underneath the soil of this jurisdiction we call South Africa, should the land also, just like all minerals, be in the hands of the state as a whole? So that anybody who wants to use land for whatever purposes, they have to defer to the state for either buying or leasing, whatever the arrangement you might put in place. So I think that's where, for me, the debate is. And just to speak to the first issue, the issue on the issue of date, for me, I think is ahistorical and technical and legal. The correct question that should be asked is, so that you see this question becomes a non-question. The correct question that should be asked is, what is the historical injustice? And what is the just thing to do to correct the historical injustice? And if you've got the facts as the Institute is doing, then 1913 will not arise as a question. Because then you will define the historical injustice quite correctly. And you will avoid this ahistoricity that we're faced with. That's the first thing. And then practically what needs then to be done is that there must be a process legally and politically to correct that question of the date. And that is through parliament. That it means that the politicians and the political parties must have political will to do it. That's all it requires. So that's around the question of land. I think, social relations have so evolved and human society has so evolved that we no longer live in a feudal economy wherein tilling the land is the only way of creating value, capital, wealth, and so on. We now live in a modern capitalist society that says the land has got a clear relationship established with money, financial capital. So much that the land can be evaluated financially and there can be financial value attached to it. So when you deal with the question of land, you do not deal with land only and these other debates that are archaic.
British pounds. I am told in today's terms the value is minimum 40 billion rand. That is the value of land. Now, when you look at the area between Midrand, Pretoria and Johannesburg, think about the development that has occurred in the past 20 years. That land used to belong to an indigenous community. We had appointed Mr. Zuma and we'll take another few hands for comments.
When this legislation was passed, was there any traditional leaders represented in the panel that was actually discussing these issues? Ezinye, I will talk in Zulu now. Ezinye insizwa zathatha umzabalazo noma zathatha ikhadi likakhongolose ngoba zazihlushwa something.
I think the problem with us, or the problem with academics, is that we think too much.
We are too intellectual.
Yes.
We intellectualize
Yeah.
everything.
My name is Tangilo. We think too much, and we forget about the mothers, the fathers, everybody in the rural areas. I've done land claims and I've been doing land claims. There's a problem out there. There are people who cannot claim because they were dispossessed before 1913. And they come to us, they cry, they want to claim land, and if you sit down and listen to them, the stories that we hear outside, it is bad. The form of dispossession that were used, white people dividing us as communities, dethroning chiefs
Kings.
and kings.
Yeah, you're right.
And you know, I think we need to talk about those things.
Yes.
Forget about being academics, let's just be ordinary people and think for those mothers and fathers and everybody. I think the Institute started doing this because of that. We've experienced that, and I'm going to urge you to talk like ordinary South African citizens. There is a problem, and we must do something. Thank you.
Thank you.
Land restitution and changing the constitution without bringing a revolution in South Africa.
Yes.
The reason I'm saying that is because we had an opportunity to change the constitution, where there was a 2/3 majority and nothing was done. So we cannot go and blame white people. We are ourselves our own enemies. That's number one. The epochs, or several epochs in the Russian Empire, brought about 4 different land restitutions. Mamala, I'm from Milan now. Angivumelani nawe in the sense that ukhuluma ngabafowethu kodwa ukhulumi ngodadewethu. I fully support what you are saying when you talk about issues of curriculum. But what's the point of a curriculum when you cannot buy back your own land? Curriculum is key, but we can't even teach our own kids. When we go back to the issue of the Russian Empire, the current stage of land ownership in South Africa is going to change, but it will take a revolution, of which I know a large part of our white counterparts, it's something they do not want to see. A large portion of our comfortable African middle class is what they do not want to see. Those with medical aids, those with government paychecks, they don't want to see that. So, one thing I do know is that I am not an intellectual. I'm a doer. So I would like to thank this movement of Umafuguza for bringing this issue. The second epoch in the Russian Empire was when because we must talk about facts. 1861, the Russian Empire, or Alexander II, by the Americans. So if I'm going to say to Bears no dear did not matter, yes, the majority of our people are suffering, but what South Korea was able to do, and I'm grateful to the African National Congress and the fact that I was able to go and live in South Korea and spend time there and understand how that economy grew. Look at what they did. Look at Samsung and Sony today. Sony used to give odd jobs to Samsung. Today, Samsung is 4 times bigger than Sony. So, my last point is, are we able to create a strong enough economic revolution to buy our economy back and decide what to do with it? Not saying that we need to discount the issue of restitution, but we cannot deal with it alone and discount other issues. I thank you.
We'll give a chance to Prof. Sithole to make a comment, and then we'll take comments from our panelists.
The only missing puzzle for me is the respect that we accord certain people to opt out of the pain. And here I am talking about the fact that we can even talk about fear of capital flight. We can even talk about constitutionality, which speaks to the fact that we are all in this together, and still talk about a possibility of buying back our land. With some people being given an opportunity to opt out of a loss, when in fact they have inherited an unjust loot. It is that amazes me about South Africans. The fact that we are saying that we are all in it, but some people refuse point blank to come to this room and say, how much of a loss are we able to actually afford in order to be together in this? This whole description of constitutionality and what it was sensitive to when it was crafted, and the fact that the capital is aligned with a certain section of the population and we allow that to happen, speaks to the fact that we have not even begun to actually engage with the question of land reform in Africa in our own terms.
Yes.
And so because we leave certain people to opt out of the responsibility of being with us, it is because of that we are in this situation, patching up a bucket that has huge holes, when certain people have taken the base and they have built something else elsewhere, and they are marveling with the option to go or not to go, and they are squashed into the corner of to buy or not to buy. I think that in essence, in everything that has been said, and what I see now, moving towards my last point, is as people have attempted land reform, have complicated everything even further, because some black people now own portions of this, we have been further divided. And therefore, we must listen very carefully to these communities and some of the political parties when they say that a possibility of starting de novo, particularly if the other people are not going to come to the party, must be left open.
coming together to say, let us debate and find solutions. In that, I will pose to everybody, including the panel, to say what happens beyond the amendment. Because in as far as I can gauge the temperature of debates, it flows even from the first roundtable that we had with the political parties, that everybody is in agreement. It's not even a matter of the two-thirds majority that we had. We still have representatives in parliament. And in fact, they are all saying Section 25(7) that limits redress should fall. Now, I want you to think as you respond, Dr. Tom, maybe you could even touch on it to say what happens beyond the amendment. Because clearly, with the temperature, the amendment is going to happen. They have young people actually stopping elections to say, before elections happen, let us amend this section. Dr. Tom?
Thanks. Yeah, it looks like now I'm connected. I don't have to hold the mic anymore. We've been asked to speak like ordinary South Africans. Let me get to being ordinary as South African. The points raised by David, or at least in terms of couching the question. I mean, we were asked to answer a very specific question. And the discussion today have revolved around 19 June 1913, precisely because that was the question that was posed. However, the need for land reform in South Africa is far bigger. Restitution is but one element of it. And I think what we also need to appreciate is, let me say it differently. We have, to a large extent today, spoken about, obviously the agitation. By the way, as a person, I certainly am also of the view, I am alive to the rising impatience and anger. I'm very much alive to it. I worked in government several years, I'm out. I had hoped that we will have somebody from the Department of Rural Development and Land Affairs and the Land Claims Commission, and to hear the perspective from government's point of view. Being outside and now looking, in from outside. And I'm certainly alive to, and even I guess at the time, because when you're a civil servant, you just get to do what's required, and you get to do the job as far as you need to do it, and as much as we can. I certainly recall that, certainly in the early 1990s, government committed to distribute 30% of land by 2014. If somebody from Land Affairs was here, I was going to assess what we used to call it, but I know that the figures hover somewhere around 8%. Against a target of 30%. That target at the time, in the early 1990s at least, at the time, government said, and that's where I think we need to make a separation between the legal questions, and the legalities are what they are, separate from the political questions, and the politics of what needs to happen, what's required, or what's being asked for. 1913 constitutionalism is a debate within the legal issues. And that's what it is. And what I tried to espouse, to say this is what the law as it stands says. That's one aspect. The other is the politics of the land reform question and the social dimensions of that. They are far deeper and far complex. The question was raised about, do we even need to pay for land? Those are certainly the questions that are coming out, that are saying that, look, those that hold land, the greater majority of them currently certainly did not pay for it. And some people go as far as saying 1652, all land South Africa was owned by Africans. And therefore, it could, these complications of the debate, but this is the point, and these are the views that are held out there, and very strongly. I know for a fact that there's a very good section of society that believes very strongly and passionately, and one or two political parties that actually say, the case at one point said, the land first, all else shall follow. The EFF is advocating for nationalization of land in a very big way. These questions are there in society, and they are being asked in different places and in different senses. But, and picking on what Dr. Ngomane said, can we deal with even what we have? What we have already committed to? If we commit that we'll do 30% of the land by 2014, and by 2016 we've done 8% of land reform. Yes, what are the challenges? What are the impediments and what are the hindrances? Yes, deal with those and address them. But to a large measure, the land questions are first political rather than a legal issue. I think that's really the essence of what I'm trying to say. It is not a legal issue, it's a political issue. And it's going to take politics to fix it. The willing buyer, willing seller issue, that for many years, for a number of years, there were people that thought and believed that the issue of willing buyer, willing seller was a matter of constitution. It never was. It was never about the constitution, but it was about political will. What happened subsequent to that? Government made a decision. We're going to move away from this policy, and we're going to establish the office of the surveyor of the land valuer, the valuer general. And yes, there have been talks about some parties are going to challenge that and say it's unconstitutional and all manner of things. But the point is, sometimes we make the constitution or the problems that we see for the constitution for what they are not. Willing buyer, willing seller was never an issue of constitutionalism, and I'm glad that politically there's been now acceptance. The constitution has always allowed expropriation for land reform purposes below market value. Always. It has always allowed it. So it's not a matter of law, and it's not a matter of constitutionalism. It is possible. The Constitutional Court has passed several judgments in terms of which has clearly stated that you can expropriate land for land reform, and this is how to go about it. Section 25 that we are quoting today says, Section 25(3) says if you're going to compensate for land reform purposes, these are the factors that you need to take into account. History of dispossession is one of the factors. So it's not that the Constitution doesn't allow you to do it, it's the political will to do it. Market value is but one element, one of 5 factors to be taken into account to make a decision whether you're going to expropriate land reform purposes. So those are political questions, and those are questions for politicians to resolve. There's the one. The other that I wanted to say was, the pre-1919, by the way, the Constitutional Court also has made a decision to allow for a claim, the Richtersveld community. The Constitutional Court has allowed for a claim to be valid that went back to 1814. The annexation by the British Crown of Richtersveld was regarded as a valid basis on which restitution can be allowed. That community was allowed, and this very briefly, these are the facts. In 1814, the British Crown, at the time, the Cape was a British colony. They annexed land in Richtersveld. Then what they did with that land, they established a state-owned diamond company, Alex Co., and they just dispossessed the community. The community continued to live on the piece of land, so they were never physically removed from the land. But they were stripped of the land, of their rights to the land. They were stripped of the economic benefit from the land, and this is what happened. So the Constitutional Court made a decision and says, that is a valid claim that should be recognized, and it has actually given the community back the value, being from arresting the points that you raised earlier about the Bafokeng, the value of the loss of economic rights that the community has suffered. So I'm just saying, yes, on the one hand, there are problems that they are there with the Constitution, but other problems have less to do with the Constitution, but more to do with political will. And David has left. I was hoping that he'd be here to hear this. So in this sense, land reform includes redistribution. Redistribution of land just requires the state to be able to buy land on behalf of and redistribute for the benefit of Africans. They just need to do that and do it well, from the point that was raised earlier by Dr. Ngomane. For that to be done, the Constitution allows it, the law allows it. Perhaps there are some operational problems within our government in the way that we do things that need to be resolved to enable that to happen. Tenure reform, a lot of the communities, until 22 years later, there's been the biggest, the need to enact the Land Tenure Act. It's still not done. To be able to deal with land where communities live for traditional leaders. In traditional communities, there's a definite need for government, finally, to pass the Land Tenure Reform Act. It's one of the clauses in the Constitution, Section 25. Section 25 says, go and do land reform, land tenure. Ensure that communities that live in traditional areas have secure tenure and do what is necessary. It does not put a limit. This thing about the date, there's no limit for tenure reform. There's no date. There's no date that says you can only do tenure reform up to 1930. It's only in relation to restitution. Redistribution does not have a date. It doesn't say you can only redistribute land based on 1843 or whatever year. So I'm saying that yes, the land question is very complex. It has many different dimensions, and many different elements. Some of it, yes, are legal, but a lot of it is political. I can demonstrate that I want to make. Thanks.
Yet another mouthful. Political will. Revolution.
Just to ask a question to my fellow panelists here. Out of the 80,000 claims that were lodged in 1998, and we are talking about 70,000 that have been settled, how many of those have been dismissed? Because they fall under the claims that have been settled. I know one case is Monolala. That was dismissed, and they are fighting that case. So we need to actually give the actual information rather than saying that the claims were settled. Just to address another matter that was raised by David, who has left. There is this issue about agricultural land being productive after the settlement of a claim. To me, this is a very strange requirement for a claimant to fulfill. I'll take a case of myself. My grandfather, grandfather's father was dispossessed from land that was turned into a sugar plantation. My grandfather had to fight for that land, and he went to jail. And he didn't succeed, passed away. My father fought for that land, passed away, without succeeding. I'm like the third generation now, fighting for the same land. The unfortunate part is that as Mr. Zuma said, we are living in a hilly part, but you know where you used to live. Land that is productive and people actually black people allow white people to say that look at the land that has been given to black people, it's not productive, and they agree with them. Don't ask me to plant sugar cane, because my great grandfather is lying there, and the white men who took over that farm didn't care that there was a grave there. A tractor would rain over his grave, and whatever graves were there. So that's part of what we have to deal with. I understand that the land has to be productive when it's given to people, but also understand our emotional state when we get that land back. Land is just a start of what we want our African brothers and sisters to look at. We hope that we'll get this 2/3 that we are looking for in the parliament, because we've done the legwork already, and we do understand that people realize that even though we might have different opinions about politics, but we are looking and we are fighting for the same things. Our people need to be part of this economy, and they will be part of it, slowly but surely. So my brother,
evil, but by those who watch them without doing anything. The J.L. Dube Institute has woken up all of us from our deep slumber. We have